His will eternal you must recognize, and our created will before our eyes. So we are obligated to acknowledge Allah's beginningless will and our originated will, Allah's uncreated will and our created will. The inner reality of Allah's independent will and the outer experience of our dependent will. And we're obligated, both are addressed by Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So experience and logic tells us of their existence, both divine will and human will, but we're commanded to acknowledge them as well. And so you have kind of three parties, in a sense, three approaches, two invalid, one valid, or three understandings. You have those who acknowledge divine will and reject human will. And they say we're just like a leaf blowing in the wind. And those who acknowledge human will and reject divine will and consider us independent. So that first party looks at humans as having no will, and the second party looks at humans as having free will. But there is a rejection. Each of those parties is rejecting one of the things that we're obligated to acknowledge. We're obligated to acknowledge uncreated divine will and created human will. And that is, the traditional sort of compatibilism of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? The people of the prophetic way and the collective. And from that collective, some veered off this way and some veered off that way. And historically, when they mention this matter, they'll mention the Jabriya as acknowledging this deviant sect as called the Jabriya, acknowledging Allah's will and rejecting human will. And the Qadriya acknowledging human will and rejecting Allah's will. So these Qadriya and the Mu'tazila are very similar. But basically, that group considers free will, basically, and independence. And the Mu'tazila, they believed, and it was sort of consistent with their foundations around Allah's justice, which were deviant foundations to begin with. The Mu'tazila actually believe that Allah implanted in us and implanted in His creation a capacity to run independently. So basically, the Mu'tazila believe that humans create their own actions. So they're on this side where they believe in this independence of humans, and that's a deviation this way, and you can see sort of the shirk in that. So they reject Allah's agency in each moment. Rather, they believe He had agency in the beginning, and then let go by giving humans independent agency. And that's a false belief. And now be careful, because a lot of people who identify as Sunni, identify as in the middle here, don't realize, but they actually have a lot of Mu'tazili beliefs. And a lot of that can come from certain attachments, spiritual issues where a strong attachment to the dunya. So you get so attached to the dunya that you think the dunya actually has cause and effect, right? Including our own selves, right? You see people who, basically have the idol of hard work, right? I got this outcome because I did this. And you only did it outwardly. Right? In reality, and you didn't bring it from non-existence to existence. Allah brought your actions and your outcomes and your own being from non-existence to existence. Okay? So the balanced middle way of Sunni Islam is acknowledging Allah's will and our will. By the way, those who reject our will, they say, we don't have any will, and so They reject Allah's commands, the Sharia. There's no point to any of it, according to them, since we don't have the capacity to choose. No. And in his wisdom, he gave agency, a sense of will to us humanity. So we recognize his will and our will. His uncreated, ours created. His will eternal, you must recognize, and our created will before our eyes. So his beginningless, qadim, and our originated, hadith, makhluk, will. Right? You have to acknowledge both. And you will find also that, the aqidah, theology, and belief is, just focused on Allah's will, because he's the object of understanding, of theology and belief. And the Sharia, the legislation, the legalities, that's the theology. The legality is tied to our will, our capacity to choose. And so we have to acknowledge both, the aqidah and the Sharia. Anyone who rejects one or the other is going to deviate potentially all the way to kufr. Allah protect us. So his will eternal, you must recognize, and our created will before our eyes. We witness our will. We experience it. We feel it. The rightly guided all acknowledge this. Their only difference being emphasis. So I mentioned Ahl Sunnah, right? So you have, sort of Ahl Sunnah in the middle, acknowledging both divine will and human will. And over here are the Jabriya, deviant sect, acknowledging Allah's will and rejecting our will. And over here are the Qadriya, acknowledging our will and rejecting Allah's will. So considering sort of this independence in humans. Now within Ahl Sunnah, acknowledging Allah's will and human will, you will find some more focused on and more emphatic about Allah's will, the inner reality. And some, so that's sort of the deeper aqidah, tawheed, and so on. They're more emphatic about that, focused on that. And some are more focused on human will, thereby focusing on the accountability, the Sharia. But those who emphasize divine will, they're still fully recognizing, fully in acknowledgement of human will. And those who emphasize human will are still fully in acknowledgement of divine will. They don't reject either, not like the deviant sect. And so there's no problem if one group emphasizes this while acknowledging that, or emphasizes that while acknowledging this. No problem. And so you will find this difference, but it's not a difference in belief, it's a difference in emphasis. And the reality is you will actually find both emphases in the words of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you will find even in your own life, sometimes you zoom in on Allah as the doer while recognizing your own doing and your own accountability and so on. And sometimes you will zoom in on your own actions and your doing while fully recognizing Allah as the doer in reality, right? And that will often come. Notice that the whole Quran is filled with two demands of us. الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. Iman and a'mal, right? Belief and action. So when you are, and you have to have both, and you have to be cognizant and approach in terms of both. And that is, the iman is focused on Allah as the doer, and the action is focused on us as the doer. And we don't get to reject either. We don't get to reject Allah as the doer. Our tawheed would be a problem. Allah protect us. Would be lacking. And we don't get to reject ourselves as the doers outwardly, or else our sharia would be lacking. And so the people who understand this, who acknowledge both fully, you'll find they have a deep iman and committed actions, even despite the emphasis one way or the other. So His will eternal, you must recognize, and our created will before our eyes. The rightly guided all acknowledge this, their only difference being emphasis. Some emphasize his uncreated will, entirely affirming ours still. And others, they're the other way around. Whichever emphasis you choose is sound. So when you find differences between Sunni Imams, and you will find this, you will find some difference in emphasis, and you will find them even debating with each other. And those debates are often not really necessarily for our eyes, but those who emphasize the divine will with less of an emphasis on the human will, those who are more emphatic about human will may actually criticize the emphasis of those who emphasize divine will. They might say, "Oh, you're not putting enough emphasis here, and you're getting people to reject their account or neglect their accountability." But then those who are emphasizing Allah's will, they'll say you're putting so much emphasis on human will that you're getting them to be not as present with Allah's unity, with Allah's agency, with Allah's independence, with Allah's tawheed. So they will critique each other in this way. It's a critique of emphasis, not a difference in belief. And others, they're the other way around. Whichever emphasis you choose is sound.